Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. This is our State of the Industry webinar presented by Yakima Chief Hops. We've got a distinguished panel of growers from all around the Pacific Northwest growing region, here to share some thoughts on challenges facing our industry, hopes for the future, and ways that we can work together to provide the highest quality hops to our global brewing customers. So I'd like to just take this opportunity, and we'll start at the end there with Mike Smith. If you can go ahead and introduce yourself and your farm.
Yes, I'm Mike Smith. Loftus Ranches started growing hops in Moxie area in 1932.
Diane Gooding. We have a family hop farm in southwestern Idaho. Originally started actually in Oregon in 1895 and started in Treasure Valley in the mid-40s.
My name's Erik Sauve with Sauve and Son Farms, fourth generation grower there, and we've been farming in Mapleton, Washington since 1938.
Tom Coleman with Coleman Agriculture, family farm. We've got getting close to 100 years of hops grown on our farm.
Hi, I'm Jessica Riel. I'm one of the co-owners of Double R Hop Ranches. We've been growing hops in Harrah since 1945.
Awesome. Thank you all for making the time to be here. We really appreciate the perspectives you're going to bring today. I really appreciate the diversity we have. I love having growers from all three states. I like having some lady representation up here. We've got some really amazing farmers that are going to share some of the challenges and some of the hopes for their particular farm, but also as an industry. And so I guess before we jump into too many new topics, I want to just reflect on crop year 23 and what we saw across the board. Mike, if you could just start on what we saw in Washington and particularly on your farm in last year's crop.
Yeah, I mean, 23 was actually a pretty good growing year for us. I think generally across all the growing regions it was good. I think from take it even a step higher from an industry standpoint, it was disappointing because we took an 8% acreage reduction, something similar to that, and we actually produced 2% more than we did the year before. So that acreage reduction on our farm and all the other farms actually didn't help last year to balance the inventory situation. So I guess that was a little bit disappointing. As a farmer, loved to have a great crop. Quality was really good, but probably would have been better off if we all would have had a little bit less crop last year. So subsequently, that takes us to another year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, it was a good growing season. Very little pest pressure and good quality hops.
Guess we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, Diane, share.
Yeah, so Idaho, southern Idaho. So there are two different growing regions in Idaho. Actually, there's one very north in the state, very close to actually bordering the Canadian border. That is a farm owned by Anheuser-Busch. So I will be mostly speaking in reference to southern Idaho, which is a climate very similar to Yakima Valley here. And spider. Sorry. Same. I'll just echo Mike's sentiment there. Really exceptional growing year. We had some disturbances unusually, that were a little bit unusual for our area and that did not affect Washington State. I've seen this once in my career, but we had a really significant tropical storm come up from Baja and then up through Arizona that dumped about 2 inches of rain in about 45 minutes with some pretty excessive wind gusts that caused some problems. But outside of that, we had great irrigation and just one of the most pleasant growing seasons that I personally have ever experienced. We had a large conversion from aroma to alpha based on opportunities and market conditions and so on. And yeah, that'll kind of tee up some stuff for future as we move forward in the conversation here. But 23 great, alpha is great. Aroma is great. I mean, it was just banner year really for southern Idaho.
Just kind of piggybacking off the two there. Same for us. We had a pretty exceptional growing year. Mildew pressures were low. Mite pressures were low. We were able to save some cost there, which was nice. But we had a rough beta year. Babies took a while to get going, and then we got just as soon as they got going, we got some high heat, kind of stunted them out a little bit. So we were kind of a little disappointed in that sense, but we were happy to see that they're kicking off this year in year 2 and they're doing great. But kind of echoing everybody else, it was a pretty exceptional year. Quality was great, and hoping that we can do that again this year.
All right. Oregon started out cold and wet, and we kind of threw the plan out the window. And then we finally got warmed up, and it took off and got really warm. I think yields were decent, quality was good. We did have the hiccup with the Simcoe variety with the split bloom and stuff, which is something I've never seen, so that kind of messed with the plan there too. And but overall, pest pressure wasn't bad, and I think it went well last year.
Yeah, I found 2023 to be a pretty enjoyable growing season as a hop farmer. Low pest pressure, good weather, low wildfire presence for us during harvest, which was very nice, and hopefully that continues. So yeah, very, very nice year last year.
Yeah, we did see the split bloom in a lot of the early varieties. I mean, it was a weird, cool spring. It was cool up here as well, right? So the plants were not growing as quickly as they thought. And then we had a really drastic switch over to a big heat event, and it just tricked those plants into blooming. So Simcoe, Centennial, a lot of those earlier varieties saw a lot of split bloom. I've actually, unfortunately, seen a little bit of that this year as well because of the cool spring we've had, at least up in Washington. Right into another big heat dome event, kind of. And so hopefully it's not going to be as dramatic as last year, but it's always a challenge. I think this is a good opportunity too. I appreciate the distinction, Diane, that you provided for Elk Mountain up north and the other region where most of our commercial partners are in the Treasure Valley. I'd like to take this opportunity for each of you to just kind of plug where you grow hops and what makes it special. I mean, it's obviously a family farm, and the land that you farm on is incredibly important to you as people and to your families. But also the regions are different agronomically and geographically. So if you could, maybe one from Washington and then Idaho and Oregon, just share a little bit about what makes your region special.
I guess I'll go. Well, of course, we want to plug Oregon hops because they're the best, right? We don't need any fights here this morning. So, yeah, I think that our cooler weather gives you a little bit different profile in the hops that we raise compared to where it's a little warmer. I can't say so much in Idaho. I guess I'll leave that up to you. But it's, yeah, I mean, we've got the water situation is pretty good where we're at, and we've got enough diversity around the farm that I can see different things at each location, and that's kind of cool to see. And, you know, it brings something different to the brewers when they come out to do selections and stuff, even just in Oregon. They vary some, so that's my Oregon pitch.
So Idaho, southern Idaho, you know, similar climately to Yakima Valley, hot, dry, high desert. So one kind of big difference between, there's two big differences, well, there's multiple big differences between Yakima and Idaho, southern Idaho is we do sit at about 2,400 feet elevation. So it's not a huge difference, but the light, the sun intensity is a little bit more intense. We also, because we're more southerly, so we're below the 45th parallel, the timing of training and burn back and sometimes even the variety mix that we can grow is a little bit different compared to Oregon and Washington, particularly Oregon just because of the heat index that we do have. Typically we are hotter and depends on the year, but rain is pretty similar between central Washington and southern Idaho. We certainly can't grow a lot of the more noble, you know, mild climate type hops in Idaho. And if we do, like when we grew Willamettes, it was just, they were so different because of the heat and also our soil composition. You know, we can get a little bit more intense on the aromatic side, I don't know, compared, but they can be really, you know, nice and bright. And traditionally for the past, you know, up until the run up for this aroma expansion, we really were known as a high alpha production area. Mm-hmm. So CTZ, and before that, you know, you had clusters and Galenas and so on and so forth. And that was kind of our mainstay. And now with new newly adapted varieties that can tolerate a little bit higher heat index, we've been able to be successful with those as well.
Cool. Maybe I've got, for Washington, a different perspective than Jessica or Erik, because we have 2 farms in Washington, obviously Loftus Ranches and Tributary Hop Farms, and they're located 25 miles apart. So the Tributary located like almost exactly between Jessica's place and Erik's place. So I think it's kind of somewhat representative of the Lower Valley. And to be honest, interestingly enough, we don't see a lot of difference between the 2 farms. Sometimes, actually, our Simcoe production, if you look at it over a long period of time, has been actually better in Moxie than it has been down there, but the differences are slight. When the hops get put on the table for selection, blind selection, right, we see brewers that will select one and the other, right? So they'll pick, maybe if they're picking 3 lots of Simcoe, they might take of ours that get selected, maybe 1 comes from Moxie and 2 come from Granger. Well, they don't even know where they come from. And so there's not significant differences, I think, from the quality of the hops that we see anyway between those 2 farms. And some of that makes sense because our agronomic practices are the same, right? Our training dates are the same, essentially. Our irrigation, strategies are the same. And so you would expect to see similar results right out of the plant, but it's amazing to us, I guess, is how similar they are. So I don't know if you guys have a different perspective, but I think it's hard to say in Washington that any area is really actually better place to grow than another area.
Yeah, I wouldn't say one place is necessarily better to grow hops. I think the only thing that really makes a difference is soil types and how you manage those. Kind of out towards the reservation area is a little more clay-like. Down in our neck of the woods, it's very sandy, which kind of actually helps us with our irrigation method. Is we soak the crap out of our soil and it just drain out right away. You don't have to really worry about overwatering so much on mature stuff. So our irrigation techniques are a little bit different. Our farm is located just like right off the Yakima River too, so in the mornings, especially in the summertime, we get really dewy and stuff like that, so we really got to keep a close eye on our mildews and stuff and stay on top of that. So that's just a unique piece of our farm there.
Yeah, I would say for us, we do have variance in the soil composition. Sometimes within the same field, we'll have a rocky area, a sand area, and then some clay mixed in. So over the many years of growing hops, we figured out with our irrigation practices how to work with that and how to produce consistent hops, whether it's one side of the farm or the other.
Sure.
How do you manage that with different soil types in one field irrigating?
We might have varying lengths of set times. We do a lot of pulse irrigation on the farm, so small bursts of water. We find that helps us manage in the different soil profiles.
Makes sense.
I think it's a cool reflection of the plant we all love and grow. That hops are adaptable in so many different soil types. You can go down to Idaho and you can play beach volleyball in some of those fields down there. And then it just also, everyone says about the Yakima Valley. It's a large area, and we got Moxie in the Upper Valley, all the production from all the way out on the reservation, all the way down to nearly Prosser at this point. All that variance in soil type, and then just on Tom's farm alone in Oregon, he can drive 45 minutes to one farm, another 45 minutes to another farm, and back. And the Willamette Valley is a beautiful place, and just the variation of agriculture down there. So I really appreciate getting out on Tom's farms as well, and being able to experience all those different areas. You touched on water a little bit, Erik, there. I'd like to go back to that topic, as that is obviously top of mind every year and something that we have to pay close attention to as an industry as a whole, but also as individual farmers. For those of you who aren't aware, there's all sorts of different irrigation districts that we all source water from depending on where we are geographically. And in our changing climates and more hot events, it's even more important that we stay on top of that. So I'd love for each of you to kind of talk about how you as an individual farmer manage water, some of the challenges that we face, and then looking forward to the subsequent years and how we're going to combat higher heat events and potentially lower snowpacks and all those sort of things that we have to worry about every year.
So I can start.
Yeah.
So our farm is located in Hera, and we are on the Wapato Irrigation Project. One of our farm owners is on the board and pretty involved in all of that. And we are on a water rotation this year. It stands out to me because my first year back on the farm professionally was 2015, and that was also a water rotation year. So we are going through the process of juggling schedules. We have fields that run for 6 days and are off for a full 3 days. And it's a challenge when you're growing hops and you're utilizing drip irrigation, which is very sustainable, but it's really hard to catch up when you've had to turn off that water, especially in the high temperatures that we're seeing right now too.
Yeah, so in Oregon, we're a little different. We don't have water districts down there. We're using wells or surface water off of lakes or rivers down there. It hasn't been an issue so far this year. I actually think the hops are starting to adapt to the increase in temperature because this heat we've had the last 2 weeks, I would have, and we talked a little bit about it, I would have expected to see some stunning or just have them stop growing, some yellow leaves down on the bottom. Didn't happen, and I was really surprised. 20 years ago, I would have expected it, no problem, but didn't see it this go around. I do still want it to cool down a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so in our neck of the woods, we're on the Sunnyside Valley Irrigation District, which is a senior water right district, so we don't have to deal, luckily, with any like shutoffs or rotations or anything like that. But we do try to be diligent in how much water we're using and not trying to overwater the plants just because it's hot outside. I think we kind of underestimate that a little bit of how resilient these hot plants are and what they can actually manage. I mean, to Tom's point there, you know, the high heats and everything where we're kind of freaking out, so you give them some water, it's like, no, they're telling you that they're doing just fine right now. But something that we don't have on our farm that I think we're going to implement in the future is some irrigation technologies with some soil moisture probes and everything like that to maybe see if maybe our irrigation technique can be adjusted a little bit to just maintain that set optimum moisture level in the soil, even though we do have a good draining soil. And so that'll be something that we're going to look at in the future.
Yeah, so Idaho, we have a set of storages. So we can store actually up to a year's worth of allotment in our storage system.
Oh, nice.
And there's an upper system and a lower system. All of the hops, I would say 80% of hops grown in southern Idaho are on the same irrigation district. There are a few outlying exceptions and farms to that, but 75-80%, this kind of holds true. And you know, when we're on flood control, we can essentially utilize whatever irrigation water we need once we turn on. But the turn-ons and the turn-offs are strictly controlled, and then we go on an allotment. And actually, right now, because it's been so hot, you know, we've been averaging anywhere between 99 and 106 degrees the last 10 to 14 days. Everybody's using a lot. It's a big system. So we've been draining one of the storages a little too quickly. So we've gone to an inch to the acre delivery. So if your head gate has 30 acres allotted to it, you can't order more than 30 inches, which for the hops is fine. For the most part with drip is very, very doable. You know, I think on the technology piece there for us particularly, and you know, we trying to run a leaner crew and less people and so on, it's been tremendously helpful. We have at least one moisture probe, if not two, in every field. Like I can't quite afford to do one per zone, but and then we do a little bit of aerial imagery, and that has different overlays, so you can actually see areas of the fields that are, you know, may have some clogging issues, or you have, you know, rocky, more drainage or so on. And that, especially this time of year, if you can keep that plant really healthy and happy, we really see less pest pressure, especially with two-spot spider mite. So the irrigation between July, like the 4th of July and harvest is absolutely like tied for #1 with spraying in our focus for plant health maintenance and sustaining that a high level as much as possible. But it's tremendous what irrigation management will do or not do for the crop.
Yeah, I guess, again, from our perspective, it's interesting because we're on so many different districts, right? We have senior water rights that cannot be prorated, right? We get 100% of our water every single year, and they don't even measure it. So they don't even know how much we're getting. right? And there's no way of measuring it. So that's in the Moxie area. But in the same vein, in the Moxie area, we're on the Rosa, which is the most proratable of the districts, right? The first cuts always come out of the Rosa. And so we've only got, say 70% of the water there, but we have water on the Sunnyside SVID. We have water on the Wapato Irrigation Project. We pump out of wells, we pump out of creeks. I mean, we got it all. I mean, we covered it all. But we have the same challenges that everybody's got, right? That we're allocated on a 100% year, we're allocated, all of us, at least in the Yakima area, are allocated supposedly 36 inches per acre. Well, hops only need 21, right? They only use 21, so you say, well, you should have plenty of water. Except the big difference is that from, it's already alluded to, from around the 1st of July until around the 3rd week, 4th week of July, they use over 2 inches a week, right? And our systems are at capacity. We only have the availability to get 2 inches, 2.1, 2.2 inches a week to the plant. That's all the systems were designed for, and they're using every bit of it right now. So if you have any kind of an allocation coming in, even though you might get more than 21 inches, if you're not getting the 2 inches a week that you need right now, the plant's it's not optimum, right? It's using more than that. So did you fill the soil profile early enough so that it can extract from that? Can you pulse to just kind of tease enough water into the plant during this, this crucial time? But what we find is when we're getting close to it too, by the time we get to the 2nd week of August, there ain't as much water at all. Right? So then the water problems go away. You probably only need 40 or 50% of the water, and we'll have more than that. And so it's kind of a timing issue right now, I guess. The automation is absolutely crucial for us. It's virtually 100% automated. Jessica and his farm and our farm have a similar system that's utilized, but it's all programmed remotely. It's all managed remotely, and that helps us in that we can be as efficient as possible, and we know when we have problems, right? We can tell what the flow rates do. We can see if there's a plugged valve or whatever. And this year, down in the Wapato Irrigation Project, every morning I see a message that this particular pump station's got a problem. And they go down and say, yeah, they shut the water off on us or whatever. So enough said, but the point is that we're also lucky that the hop plant is so resilient, and it has a very large, I would say, range of acceptable water. That it can deal with too much water, right? And it can deal with what's less than optimum water. We're lucky that we have a plant that just is so strong and so resilient and can handle 105, 107 degree temperatures and actually do quite well. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting point there. And Tom brought that up too, seeing plants growing right through the 105 degree temps. Some, obviously, from my perspective, some obviously do way better than others. Mosaic seems like it's never too hot for Mosaic. It's going to keep growing.
That's it.
Other varieties do kind of shut down a little bit. Some closes, and they kind of just do their best to conserve water. Mike brings up that range of water usage by the plant. Another huge crop up in the Yakima Valley is obviously wine grapes. Deficit irrigation has been a tool used by grape growers for a lot of years now. And it makes sense in there, and they're concentrating the sugars and concentrating the flavors in those grape berries, and it makes sense. In hops, do you see that being a worthwhile exploration? If we can concentrate the compounds within the lupulin glands in a way and measure it based on water usage, do you think that'd be a viable experiment?
We actually are doing a similar experiment on our farm right now, and it's in one proprietary variety, and we're only in the 2nd year of this test that we're doing. And in the 1st year, it appeared as though if you reduced water usage and the canopy size of the plant, you did experience greater aroma and greater sensory. And although that was true, we are seeing this year that some of those plants look a little slow to start. So there might be some long-term negative impact on the plant if you do that. But again, we're only in the 2nd year, so maybe by next year I'll have more of an update.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I know that you guys are working on that. personally, I'm intrigued by that. I think it'd be fun exploration. Changing gears just a little bit, and I'll kind of just talk about my personal journey in the hop industry. I started with Yakima Chief Ranches in 2013, and that the whole journey has been one heck of a rocket ship. And I remember vividly my first year, we were growing Simcoe and Citra. Mosaic was not even a brand released yet. We had just Simcoe and Citra, and just amongst the 3 Yakima Chief Ranches owners, so Loftus Ranches, Carpenter Ranches, and Peralt Farms, I remember distinctly we had 865 acres to cover, because it was me and Sam Turner were the interns, and we're like, how in the heck are we going to cover all this acreage? And we've gone from that, from our 3 owner growers, to working with over 40 different entities over the last decade, going from 900 acres to well over 15,000 acres of just our varieties. And so the experience over the last decade has been an amazing one, and a rocket ship, certainly in chasing our tails to keep up with the demand for these brands but from our brewing customers. That all kind of culminated with the largest crops we've ever brought in 2021, 2022. Following 2022 and all of the lingering effects from COVID, all the lingering effects from all of our brewing customers being long on hops, our industry is facing reductions. It's not the first time ever. Some of you have lived through a few of these cycles.
Is that a reference to being old?
Definitely.
It's more experience.
I like that.
Yeah. And it's a reality that we're all facing. It's affecting all of our farms. It's affecting Yakima Chief hop supply chain. It's affecting the entire hop market, the entire brewing market, and it's painful. It's not been fun to have the conversations of pulling acres out and asking farms to idle yards and not bring in production. And so in 2023, the industry as a whole experienced an 8% reduction, and that was across the industry as a whole, kind of just percentage based of what you were delivering. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to stem the tide, and then in 24, so going to this year, there's another 18% reduction on top of the 8% of 23. I'd like each of you to comment on how that is affecting your farm personally. Some commentary perhaps on previous cycles and how we were able to dig out of these in the past, and then your best guess at how we get out of this as an industry. I'd like to start with maybe Tom.
All right. Well, our family farm has been very diversified as far as that we've grown row crops. We do grass seed, we do some grains and stuff, and we had a dairy at one time. And so I think maybe Mike might have a better opinion, but I mean, because what we did as the market took a downturn, we pivoted back to those other crops and got involved in that. And you didn't, I guess I wasn't. We'd done it before, I guess, around the farm, so it's what we're used to doing. One thing I will mention is right now, a lot of those other crops aren't available. It's just there's an oversupply, and so we're seeing a little more fallow acreage around the farm than I would like to see right now. And so we're still investigating other avenues to try and keep the farm going. I mean, for me, one of the biggest fears when something like this happens, you've got employees that have been there 5 to 40 years around the farm, and just how to be able to keep that moving forward, because they're the great team we have, and that's what makes the farm work. So that's a big part of it for me, just trying to keep those people busy and with us on the farm.
Yeah, kind of to go off of that as well, and our farm especially, or I can probably speak to any farm. I mean, you want to grow every acre you have. You know, you got to spend the money on the land taxes and everything like that, whether you're growing something out or not. So not having something in the ground there hurts a little bit. But the flip side of that, the small positive out of all this is it's given us a chance to review, assess, and make a change on some maybe struggling yards, alpha, aroma, or whichever, switch over to maybe some virus-free plant material, which we've been able to do this year, growing a virus-free 682 yard, which is kind of going to be a neat thing to see as far as going up against the traditional rootstock. So there is a little bit of positivity out of that. But the big one that I always preach to is exactly what Tom said. You know, you're growing less acreage, you don't need as many people. You've had people who have been loyal to you for years and years and years, and you just quite honestly don't need that many people. So you see the hurt on their faces, one with our labor overtime issue that we're already seeing here in Washington State that's making us make hard decisions there, but also just telling people no as a whole. I mean, we got a list of people in the labor queue right now looking for jobs, and we just can't hire them because we can't afford that. So you'd like to say yes to everybody, you'd like to help everybody out, but just don't need it with the reduced acreage right now. So it's just kind of the trickle down effect of not just hops, but we're people who rely on those hops to provide for their own families as well.
So for our farm particularly, Dad is always very conservative and, kind of a contemporary of Mike's. My dad's also named Mike, so yeah. And his perspective was always really helpful because he's been through a number of cycles, and his whole career was a really challenging era of hop production. 80s and 90s, early 2000s. So, I tried to listen to him. He's like, hey, if it's not yielding well, we should take it out. So we started reducing acreage in 2018. The first couple yards dropped and flipped those into other crops. And a couple years ago, saw those volumes just in the stalks continuing to increase, and kind of started playing around with some seed crops. Our Treasure Valley is really kind of famous for growing a lot of different types of seed crops. So, radish seed, all sorts of lettuce seeds, sweet corn seed, onion seed, and then we have a pretty vast produce production, quite a few bell peppers, onions, potatoes. There's a sugar beet, sugar factory fairly close by. So growers have been able to kind of get into some of these other crops, and we took a pretty kind of put our little pinky toe in a couple years ago and have been able to grow those relationships, which was now I'm very thankful for, because had we just gone in this year and tried to knock on doors, this would not have been available. So being nimble, I think, is really critical in downturns, and trying to just do the best you can with what you've been dealt, and don't be afraid to drop trellis, because especially older trellis, it's probably time for a reset. That'll do the ground some good, also clean it up. Weed bank seed, the weed seed bank that's there is usually pretty tremendous. But the next crop following hops, because although they're resilient and great, they're kind of lazy on nutrient uptake compared to some other crops. And usually the next crop that you grow following hops is highly productive, to the point where potato guys will, 2 years out from hops, will pay really high rent prices to sublease out hop ground. So that's kind of what we've done. It's a challenging situation, and for Southern Idaho, I kind of ran some preliminary numbers between harvest of 2022 to now. We've reduced our aroma footprint by 47%, and that's a lot. And some of that has been converted to alpha, and some of that has just gone away, whether people are growing stuff under the trellis or the trellis is all the way out or being fallowed or what have you. That's all on-farm decisions and what best suits their modus operandi or whatever. But we're certainly trying to do our part in correcting the imbalance.
Well, for our farm, we've tried to be adaptable. For instance, this year we only have a few baby yards, and they're refreshes primarily, so I haven't had as much work for employees to do. We did put in a Concord grape field. That's something that's been on the list of to-dos for several years, and we were able to focus on that. One of the challenging things, of course, is planning out the next year's activities and what jobs need to be taken care of, and we utilize the H2A program on our farm, and so we're having to file and contract and make decisions about how many people we need, sometimes as early as January, and the hop industry has been making later and later decisions about what we're doing for any given year. So we spend a lot of time in the off season considering the strategy of how to implement our programs and try and maintain the full-time positions for our year-round employees. And in this case, ended up meaning minimized H2A usage. So instead of one long contract, we're doing 2 shorter contracts.
Same here.
Gosh, where do I start? Got into the industry initially in 1974. I mean, essentially, we skipped a generation in our family. I basically took over the farm, or was actively involved with the farm with my grandmother when I was 19 years old. That's when I started my career. So 74, you know, I saw an incredible increase in 79 and 80 where the prices quintupled, right? We had $5 a pound spot hops in 1979. I mean, go back and inflation adjust that, right? I mean, she said it's ridiculous. In big acreage expansions, and then an absolute collapse in the market by 1981. Dealers were actually paying growers to take acreage out. In 1981, in 79, we had a $5 price. I mean, that's how you know, I guess, inelastic we see the demand, right? And how volatile the acreage can be. And so I lived through that contraction. In the middle of that contraction, so let's say 81 peaked, 86, by 86, it was bleak in the industry. Well, I don't know, how many of you guys were born in 86? Anyway.
Definitely.
How many of you were in school? So you hadn't even got...
That was 2.
Yeah,
exactly. So the point I was trying to get at, so 86 was I mean, it was bleak. And we were given a tremendous blessing in that there was a scare in Europe on full pet. That was the compound, and the U.S. had banned any hops with full pet on them. And so Anheuser-Busch had to come to the U.S. and move production. And right at a time when we had nowhere to go with all of this acreage, all of a sudden we had these huge Willamette contracts, and then we had huge, your dad went through a lot of that, Willamette, Fuggle, Aquila, Banner, just you can go through the list, right? It saved us. So we got through 86, and then in 90 we had another alpha shortage, 1990, and we had an incredible run up from 90 to 94, right? But the exact same thing that happened in 1980 happened in 1990, 1991, and it collapsed again. And the contraction that we went through from 1994 to 2007 was the most painful time I've ever seen in the hop industry. We just bled equity every single year. If we go back and look at those years, I don't think we ever had a year where we actually made money. So we kept going back to the balance sheet, putting more debt on the balance sheet, and we kept shrinking the farm, we kept cutting expenses, and our yields started falling. Anyway, it was a horrible time, and I saw so many growers go out of business. When I got into business in 1974, there was 250 growers in the state of Washington. Wow. Right? Think about that. And how many is there today in the state of Washington? Maybe 30? I don't know. But point is, so we got through it. So then the big, finally 2007, 2008, what happened? We had this enormous run up in alpha again. Acreage increased. I was looking at the figures. It was so interesting to see what happened with Idaho. Idaho, because I think, partially because you have so many options, your acreage moves ridiculously in percentages, right? So big run up in 2007, 2008. I was just looking at the figures. In 2012, Idaho took out over 40% of their acreage in 2012. Yeah, I'm looking at the figures here.
But the total acres are, you know.
But the percentage is huge, right? Because you're spreading it over a few number of growers. What was really interesting is then if we just fast forward it to, I believe it's 2000 and, what is it? I misspoke. 2010, they took 40% decrease. 2012, you took a 30% increase. 2 years later, right? All driven by aroma hops, right? So the alpha market collapsed. How did we get saved from that alpha contraction? Craft took off. So we've had two events in these contractions that actually saved us, and both of them were kind of unforeseen. Right? Nobody could have seen the explosion in craft acreage. But then you fast forward to last year, and we took this 8% cut. Idaho took the least percentage last year, but then this year, Idaho took like over a 30% cut.
The only reason that it was less percentage basis is because it was converted.
Understood. But the point I'm trying to get at is that in the acreage contractions that we see, Idaho moves the most on percentage basis. That's what the history shows us.
Because historically have been the smallest. So small changes in acreage equate into large percentage basis.
Understood, but the pain is not distributed
Yeah. It's
equally, right?
Not great.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The point that we're trying to get to is that, I think this is where you're going, Joe, is that in 2021, we peaked at 61,000 acres, okay? And there was enough capacity in the industry to pick 61,000 acres, to grow it, to store it, and to process it. There's enough capacity to ship it, but we didn't ship it. That was the problem. And so now we're in 2024, and we're down 44,000 acres. Where are we headed, right? How soon do we actually see a bottom in the acreage and then an upturn in the acres? And that's what we don't know, right? It's been unfortunate because we're seeing less demand in craft than what we saw 3 or 4 years ago. There's definitely been a decline for U.S. aroma hops based on the loss of barrelage in craft over the last 4 years. Hopefully that's bottomed out. But anyway, I've said enough. This is the third contraction I've seen, Joe. I've told my family I'm actually not interested in fourth, but I'd still like to be alive, but I don't want to participate. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm at.
No, we appreciate that perspective. That's awesome. And I'm not really trying to go anywhere with it. It's just I want it to be authentic perspectives from each of you and then how it's affecting us. I think Erik touched on the positive part of it. Is like we were running around juggling and spinning plates and doing all this sort of stuff, and it was like, let's just set this all down for a second. And let's go put this ball where it goes. Let's go put this plate back in the cupboard. And let's really focus on quality and commitment to our brands and the brand integrity. That runaway train I was talking about when we were chasing our tail just to put in more and more acres, that led to us working with nearly every grower in the Pacific Northwest.
Sure.
There were really positive things about that, and it was also created some challenges for us that are responsible for brand consistency and true to typeness and picking within harvest windows and making sure that our brands are being well represented in the brewing market. And so, like I said earlier, we've had a lot of painful conversations with family farms over the last couple of years where there's a handful of growers now that we're no longer working with because of the contraction. And that's not fun for anybody. And my particular role in the company is I'm working with all of our growers very closely. So it is something that we don't take lightly. And I'd also like to offer that we're complicit in this too, right? As far as a breeding program, as far as procurement, the data we used to use to make our procurement decisions was faulty as well. And so I don't want to sit up here and say, man, we're doing our best and these darn farmers messed it up. That's not the case. I think going forward, it's important to take those lumps and learn from them and do things better. And we've got people and processes in place that are going to allow us to do that. And so I'm really optimistic that doing the right thing is going to create the right solutions. That said, we do have challenges. Hops are used for basically one thing. And if our brewing customers are in an overall decline, certainly domestically that's the case. We've got growth spots around the globe. I guess I would posit, what is the unexpected surprise for us? I mean, what is the potential? I can think of, South America and Europe and other areas, Australia, New Zealand, where craft is growing. Not enough to make up the difference in domestic loss in craft. And not that we'd ever wish misfortune on any of our growing colleagues globally, as we're facing more and more restrictions, more MRL restrictions, fewer chemical compounds that we're able to use to produce crops. the EU is seeing that even worse and even more drastically right now. We're seeing stories of people driving their tractors in downtown Brussels and spread manure, and there's protests going on right now. We're not quite seeing that in the US, but as restrictions continue to close in on us, that could really change the global hop market in a big way. So I guess I'll posit the question to you. What is your unexpected surprise that you might anticipate?
Who's up?
Oregon?
No.
I'll go. I mean, it's trimming the fat. You guys kind of alluded to that. It's gonna to continue to have a healthy farm and a healthy business. At a certain point, if you don't make changes and you keep doing the same thing, there won't be a next year, right? So being really cognizant of that and getting experience with other crops, I think also leads to learning new opportunities. So, we started growing a few peppers. I heard somebody else might have started growing a few peppers, and it's a different crop, but you learn different things from different situations and opportunities. And I think with the advancement of technology, that's going to really impact and influence us as an industry in positive ways. We're already seeing it with irrigation monitoring, aerial monitoring, sap testing or petiole testing, foliar sprays to help maximize plant health that will minimize pest interference, which in turn will minimize less sprays, which in turn helps with MRL issues. I mean, all of these things, it kind of, I think we're at the onset of sort of a snowball effect and hopefully a positive turn towards using technology to our benefit and advancement and efficiencies, for an industry as well as in agriculture in general.
Great.
So Diane, you made it easy for me. I agree. We're looking on the farm at some of those inefficiencies that we've had, and it's amazing how many we can find. Just with what's going on right now, you start looking at things a lot closer because you're not running around with, if I had it, hair on fire, trying to chase things down. But and you start looking at what's going on, and it's been a good experience. So I do appreciate that from what's going on in the market.
Good, really?
It's been a learning experience.
Yeah, I
Gotta be positive.
can't really think of an unexpected surprise, I guess, to answer your question, Joe. I kind of would applaud the Yakima Chief team and especially the sales and stuff, looking out there and trying to find that diamond in the rough there and finding some other regions across the globe that maybe we didn't pay a lot of attention to during the big boom and stuff like that, but realizing that there's some potential out there. But back on the farm side, we're never going to lose sight of growing quality hops. That's our mission. That's what we signed up for with the Yakima Chief hops. So the MRL issue, losing some tools in your tool belt, has pushed us to think of more bio-friendly options, predatory bug releases and things like that, which we've kind of done in the past and seen some good results with that. So just innovating some new ideas, some new techniques, some new practices in our farm is always going to be on forefront, and just making sure that we provide quality hops to the market.
I don't find that change is all that surprising anymore. We have to be just so nimble and able to adapt, and at times it feels like there are a plethora of all these new technologies we can implement, and so there is some work in sorting through, what suits your farm. And a lot of that is just us conversing together and comparing notes with other farms. This industry has always been very friendly to help each other out, even though we are direct competition.
Yeah, I think also kind of devil's advocate a little bit, as we were operating on optimism a little bit the last 2-3 years. Thinking after COVID, things are just going to go back. We're going to be growing 60,000+ acres and this and that, and taking that big step into realism and realizing what we need to be growing for this market and what our customers are actually asking for. Maybe growing more on less acres like we did a couple years ago, and taking that step and looking into the deep dive of that and operating on more realism.
So going back to the contraction conversation, I mean, there are bright spots to contractions, right? You have to look for them a little bit. But one of the things that I've noticed about my farm, as well as the other farms that have made it through the previous contractions, is that as we move into a contraction, the financial pressures are so great that we're forced to get really efficient, right? And the opposite happens in expansions, right? During expansions, times are usually good, otherwise you wouldn't be expanding. And so our management practices in general get a little bit looser, right? We spend money in places that maybe it's not absolutely necessary. And so the best times that our farms ever had, and I believe the industry's ever had, are in the backside of the contractions. So you get through the contraction, you're more efficient, the expansion comes, and the largest margins that we make are the first few years of that expansion phase, right? Because we're so efficient, right? We're watching every dollar. And so I guess what I would say is good times are in front of hop growers at some point here. They always have been in the past. I don't anticipate that they won't be. The painful part of the contractions, and I've watched it happen unfortunately, is that there are casualties, right? In every contraction, we lose participants. We lose grower participants, we lose dealer participants. And what's really painful about that is you know these people, you're friends with them, you've had relationships with them. But for whatever reason, there can be external pressures that add to it, but it happens, right? And that's the hardest part of what we're going through, the phase we're going through right now. It's so early in the phase that we haven't experienced the casualties, right? But we will. I have no reason to believe that it will be any different than other contractions. And that's just part of it, right? This is part of a natural business cycle. So I guess I'm optimistic as we come out the other side, right? But there will be less of us that will come out the other side. And I don't mean that to be like this black cloud, right? It's just a realization of the realities of business cycles.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. Also, I'd like to just talk a little bit about within the breeding program, and a lot of the commercial successes that we've had in my career have mostly been aroma hops, novel aromatic hops that are really influencing hop-forward beers. I know in a previous life, you were on the road a lot, out selling hops on behalf of the company and going into more commodity markets. I'm pretty optimistic about the aim of our breeding portion right now, of the breeding company, what we're working on. We're not just looking for the next Citra. We're looking for commodity hops that can still return a high return to growers, but can be utilized by so many more brewing customers globally. And so I'm kind of holding out hope that we're going to be able to find some new markets to go sell hops. Before the webinar started, you guys were talking about alpha market as well. Could you comment on that while we're on the webinar here and kind of what you see there?
I was looking at some figures I found very interesting as I was pouring through some of this data, and it was for a recent Yakima Chief Board meeting that I brought it up and shared it with the board members. And at the peak of our alpha production in the most recent cycle, expansion, say 2008, to the alpha production that we had in 2023, there's a gap of 20 million pounds. So we grew 20 million pounds of high alpha hops at the peak of the last cycle. And last year it was 20 million pounds less. That to me is an enormous opportunity. All the trellis exists, all the harvest capacity exists, all the processing capacity exists, all the distribution capacity exists. And so if I had to say there's a bright spot, I think the US has the opportunity to reassert itself and reclaim some of that lost alpha market. And we gave it up willingly for good reasons. I mean, we could move to higher margins. I shouldn't say we let, but the German growing community took over those lower priced commodity price market.
New alpha hops.
They developed new alpha hops. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that's going to be there'll be a struggle, right? Because when there's too much when there's a lot of capacity chasing a limited market, there is a fair amount of price competition until that can all work itself out. But yeah, I think the U.S. is well poised to grow some acreage at lower margins than what they have been growing in that.
Sure. Yeah. Do you anticipate restrictions on our German colleagues changing that paradigm sooner than maybe we expected?
I can't really speak to it. It doesn't look like it's favorable for them, right? At some point it feels like, and somebody else can comment too, it feels like, you know, there'll have to be some pretty hard decisions made, right? The fact that they are looking at investing the amount that they're looking at investing to bring water to all those German growing regions, I think is pretty interesting, right? Because one of the real challenges that they have is lack of irrigation, right? And so that could be a bit of a game changer for them. I can't really speak to the chemical restrictions, but there's opportunities to breed around those, right? We see certain varieties that just don't have the pest pressure that other varieties do. So anyway, yeah, I think that it'll as always, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Transition just a little bit to some other economic factors that we're facing, specifically just inflation, the increased cost of materials, the increased cost of everything, all the inputs on your farms, increased cost of labor. We are in Washington State phased in at this point to our 40-hour overtime laws. I just read an article.
We're still at 55.
Just read an article about Oregon last week, and they're just starting their phase in now. Idaho, a little different situation. So I appreciate each of you to kind of offer your perspective on challenges with labor, what you're doing on your personal farm to keep labor costs in check, and then how we go forward from here.
So for us with the overtime, that's been one of the bigger struggles with these long-term employees. It's just, you know, they may have worked 60 hours a week for 20 years in their career, and all of a sudden, or more during harvest and other crops and stuff, but now you're trying to phase it back. And I mean, we've done a pretty good job, I will say, the farm managers. We're trying to be a year ahead of whatever the state's thrown our way. And so, yeah, we're trying to keep it down. We still see some overtime, but it's been a big change for a lot of these employees, just how it works. And we're not going to work Saturday. No, can't afford to. Sorry. So that's kind of what I've seen as far as labor goes. Yeah.
I think it has driven a lot of efficiencies for us because now we are in this 40-hour-a-week reality, and we've looked at various tasks we do at the farm and which are essential and which aren't. And we've learned a lot. We can farm without being present on Saturdays, although we do get a little uncomfortable about irrigation season. So we have some guys on a rotational schedule. We got creative with our harvest scheduling. So in fact, this year, I think a lot of our employees will get 2 days off a week, and it's a healthier work-life balance. People stay healthier during harvest and safer. And so there are some silver linings to all this, but it has presented significant challenges for us. Coupled with the higher H-2A wages that most of us pay here in Washington.
Yeah, pretty much the same at our farm as well, realizing you can do less but still produce good hops. Harvest will be a challenge this year for us with the 40-hour work week. We're going to try to minimize the overtime as much as possible, but obviously harvest will bring its own challenges and exceptions to that. We work half days on Saturdays for some people. If we have some spraying to do, we'll get them out there for a half day to make sure we stay on schedule there. And same thing, we bring a couple irrigators and stuff to make sure that nothing's blowing apart on any of the drip tubes or anything there. But for the most part, I'd say about 75-80% of our employees are 40 hours a work week. And obviously at the turn of the new year, it was a lot of growing pains with that, a lot of moaning and groaning with that, but then realizing that this is just the new norm. It's not just our farm, it's Washington State, so they realized that really quickly, and as apologetic as we can be, it's just going to be something to keep navigating and try to do as much as we can to provide them with a healthy lifestyle as well.
Yeah, so in Idaho, the state of Idaho has not implemented any overtime as of yet. As my good colleague or friend from Oregon would say, welcome to Idaho, set your clocks back 20 years. Not quite, but it's coming. You know, California has embedded itself in the Treasure Valley, so with that comes changes in governmental positions and elected officials and so on. So For us, it's probably only a matter of time. Albeit, I do feel fortunate. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. Absolutely, I feel for all of the farms. We do have some small holdings in Eastern Oregon, so we're not totally immune to the situation. And there are a number of farms that have kind of, foot in both doors, so to speak. And honestly, I feel bad for the people. The help doesn't want restricted hours. They don't want to work less. They want to work more. And as a farmer, we can't afford to give them that OT. And it is healthier work-life balance. But when you're here from Mexico for 4 months and you want to work 70 hours a week, because that's what you're hoping to send back to your family, that's a real bummer. And so, my heart actually kind of goes out to a lot of the folks that are in that situation, because ultimately they are losing opportunity and hours and money, frankly, just because the farmers cannot afford to. I mean, you just run yourself out of business literally in 2 years, I think, if you let them do all the things that they wanted to. On our farm, we still utilize H2A, and the rates have gone up, and we do have some newer local folks, but, for the most part, we're kind of keeping on and cutting where we need to. And but we're running a leaner crew, and those guys are really appreciative, because they do get more hours in Idaho, and we have a waiting list of 200 people to come and get on our contract, and we've got 38 spots. So but it helps keep everybody in line, and everybody knows the standards and the expectations, and they meet those. So we help each other in that regard.
You gonna take care of that one, Mike?
I don't think I can add a lot, other than we've been surprised at how we've been able to manage it, because we have paid virtually no overtime this year, and we didn't think that was possible, and we don't feel like we're behind. There's been some benefits in that we've been able to improve our reporting, so that we now know what it costs us to do every single job in every single field, how many hours people are checked in the field and they're checked out of the field. The report's available immediately. And so we have a lot real-time reporting to like how efficient we are. Well, why did it take 8 hours to do this task in this field and it only took 4 over here? Sometimes there's a good reason, sometimes there's not. But it allows us to actually manage that. So it's been good. But to the point that everybody else made, the sad part about the unintended consequence of it is that our people are making less, right? They're getting paid more per hour, but their overall take home, their gross pay that they get is being reduced. That's unfortunate, and we don't know exactly what to do about that. Other than we treat them as well as we can, and we can, do what we can for health care and 401ks or whatever. The H2A is interesting. We're so heavily H2A that we're so embedded in that program, I don't know how we would ever extract ourselves from it, because it's in the hundreds of people that our peak is. And so I feel bad for those guys. I mean, they come in, like you said, Diane, or whoever said it, I think, they come in to make money for their families, right? I mean, they come from pretty poor families in pretty remote areas of Mexico, and they're taking home significantly less than they were, say, 3 or 4 years ago. And so I think that's one of the unfortunate consequences, but enough said.
Yeah, appreciated perspectives. Any more comments on H2A? As far as if you are a farm that contracts for H2A labor, what are your requirements as far as local labor? Can you comment on that?
So we do still hire locals, and in fact, I think we would all prefer to hire locals. The H2A program is extremely involved. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of gray area that it can be uncomfortable to operate within. So, we would love to see a greater turnout of the local workforce, but even with a year like this where we know that ag is not doing exceptionally well and there are more people looking for work, I would still need H2A at my farm.
And I think we have the same situation. We had a lot of people sign up early, but then as the weather breaks, people disappear and nobody shows when it's time to go. And so that's kind of, we've we've shared that between what we call domestic workers and the H-2A program. We're doing that a little more than we had before because it seems to be an availability, but we can't rely on it if we want to do the crop, what it needs to be done.
Yeah, we're 100% local labor, so I can't really attest to any of the H-2A.
Lucky.
Yes. I mean, H2H is challenging. You know, we were local folks until 2018, and I fought it tooth and nail, to be honest. I mean, Jessica and Kevin sat with them for lunch a number of years ago, and they kind of, you know, with especially labor shortages in Treasure Valley, it's a very quickly expanding residential area, commercial area, so on and so forth. So a lot of the local folks have gone to construction, framing, roofing,
Sure.
some of the trades, lawn care, I mean, kind of you name it. So for us as a farm in the footprint that we're currently at, I don't know that I could piece it together without them. It does, you know, there's liability risk from audit perspective. Our good friends at the DOL can have their little stop-bys and surprise visits, which, as I say, sometimes I don't like surprises because they're usually bad. So, you know, there's kind of pluses and minuses. We have found some really actually great newly immigrated people. There's a group that came from Peru on asylum that has been a real tremendous help to our farm when we were a little bit short and some times where we were really busy. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that piece with immigration and you know, the mass amounts of people that have come. I just don't think they've made it quite up here yet, or to the Pacific Northwest as a labor force, but there's quite a few folks out there that are really wonderful people and good workers, and ultimately might be advantageous because you don't have to house them, you don't have to transport them. The general impact would be less on the farm administration side. It's just the throughput. Can you get all the jobs done?
Great. I think we've spoke about labor enough. I mean, it's obviously a challenge. It's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, just
We can talk
one
about
quick
it.
comment too, if I can. I mean,
Sure.
we are seeing a pretty big flush too of more local labor coming down because of farms adapting more into the H-2A program. And we've had people come drive down clear from Hoxie looking for a job and used to work at a farm up here, but have more H-2A stuff. So, you know, as nice as local labor is, it's going to be really nice here come harvest when we're going to hire more people and run multiple shifts on our crews and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of like another trickle-down effect of the H-2A program. It's pushing more local labor into our community.
Great. I appreciate that. Transition right into this year. I mean, how has the crop year 24 season been on each of your farms? Obviously another kind of, there is no, like Jessica alluded to, what is the normal growing season anymore? I know I've certainly seen, just in my 12 years, a lot of variation. And there is not really a new normal as we continue to see transitions and the heat dome events and all the wacky stuff we're seeing, just climate-wise. But just a couple minutes on what you're seeing so far this spring, your prognostication on maybe yield, maybe by variety or just on your farm would be great, but I'd love to hear from each of you on that.
I think this is always a nice time of year to look at our plants. They've reached the wire. Hopefully they're healthy. We had a pretty mild spring, not a lot of warm temperatures to get the soil warmed up and get plants growing. But we were able to push things along and train when needed to reach the wire around the 4th of July, which is typically the goal. Low mildew presence at the start of the season, that's subsided, but now we do have some spider mite pressure. Last year, Centennial had a lot of split bloom, and there was a huge challenge in determining when the best time to harvest was. This year, Centennial looks very nice.
Yeah.
Amarillo looks nice. A lot of the earlier aroma varieties at this point in time look to be, I'd say, an average good quality year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so guessing what the yield is going to be is something I don't play with because I'll jinx it for sure. But it's been a decent year. I mean, when things got moving, we did have some mildews down there, more so powdery, which we haven't seen for a couple of years. Insect-wise, we're seeing some population build. I'm actually surprised it's not higher than it is, so fingers crossed. But yeah, the crew's just, keeping the irrigation moving. We're going and checking lines and making sure everything's flowing like it's supposed to, and then starting to prep for harvest. So it's been good so far.
When do you guys start harvesting Oregon?
That one I'll throw a number out. 24th of August
24th.
this year.
I just know we always get a really jovial group of Oregon farmers coming up to Washington after they're done with harvesting.
Oh, yeah.
What are you guys doing? Still working, huh? Cool. Love that visit.
Yeah, but we're still playing around in
Yeah.
the second half of August.
That's true.
Yeah. Kind of similar to Jessica's points on what things are looking like. Cool spring. We actually saw a pretty good flush of early mildew at our place, both downy and powdery. Fought pretty hard early, got knocked back pretty good, right just in time for burst stage, which was the overall goal. Overall, I would say we're sitting at about average crop right now. I think our highlight right now, growth-wise, will be Mosaic. That thing is just not slowing down at all, even with the high temps right now. Simcoe will look about average. Our Citra is probably going to be average to slightly below. That one's probably the slowest growing one here in the high heat, but nothing completely stunted like it did the last couple of years, which is nice to see. I actually just saw some cones starting to form, early cones starting to form in some Simcoe right now.
Yep.
We had a pretty good scare last year. I think we started on August 23rd picking Simcoe last year, which was very unexpected, but turned out to be just fine. So overall, things are looking good. Babies are behind, but they're still growing. So we're just trying to make sure that we create a nice ground for 2-year-olds. But overall, I think it's been pretty good so far.
Southwestern Idaho, similar to here, cooler spring. We had a really warm March, which was a little strange. We grow a biennial seed crop, and it started bolting in late March, which is like a month and a half early. So that was interesting. So hops got kind of started a little bit early, and then we did burn back, and then it just cooled off. And to the point where we were training some of our hops that we train later in Idaho. If you're training them up here on the 20th, say like take Centennial for example, we would like to train that on the 26th. We were training on June 5th or 4th, so that gets a little dicey. But then we did have the heat units, and it wasn't too much in the water, and it just is stressful. When you're training stuff in June and to get it to the wire by the 4th of July, that's essentially like 30 days to go 18 feet. So that does create some stress, but we had some downy powdery early, and now with the high heat, essentially that's like the best fungicide ever. 105 degrees, if there's a silver lining there, right?
Wonders.
Yeah, no, and then just utilizing fertility and keeping all that kind of stuff, supporting the plant. In Idaho, if we're not at the wire by the 4th, it won't make it, period, the end. We're about 20 to 30 minutes day length less daylight than Yakima Valley. Actually looked it up the other day, it was like 23 minutes less. And that matters. Once you start getting below 15 hours of day length, that signals to the plant that it's time to reproduce, winter's coming, so on. So we'll see. The things were starting to bloom pretty hard right as I was leaving. So, and stuff can change in a couple days. The one concern with the high heat is it will stay in burr longer, which can present some other challenges. But I think jury's out. Average crop for Idaho for sure would be my best guess at this current moment.
I'm not sure exactly what I can add, Joe. The split bloom conversation is interesting because I think it was alluded to earlier, that's primarily the outcome of warm springs. right? Really warm Mays, really warm early Junes. The early varieties get going, they get up too early, they bloom, the second growth comes through, it blooms later, you've got mixed maturity on the plant. I don't think those are the best quality years, right? Like you said, Eric, we start picking Simcoe the 23rd. Well, that's not the ideal time to pick Simcoe, but in that particular instance, probably was the best you could do. So I think this year we get rid of that problem, right? So I think that from a quality standpoint, that's going to be quite helpful. What we found on our farm is it's actually very interesting. It's not just our farm, it's actually the entire state. But we have like a every other year thing going on, which I don't quite understand. And what we found is, and it's true again this year, is that the even numbered years, for some reason, are cool. They have much lower growing degree units, and this has been true now for 6 years in a row. I should go back further and look, but 6 years in a row, have been cooler starting from middle of April to the middle of June. And they're outliers, right, compared to the other years. And then the odd years are exactly the opposite. And the odd years are the big crops, and the even years have been the small crops. Okay, when I see that, I have a hard time anticipating that the outcome of the crop won't be similar, right? And so I've told the Yakima chief that my prediction is that we'll come up 10% short over what our POs are, and our POs are based on kind of what people expect the yields to be, right? Mm-hmm. When I look at that, I look at the babies across the valley, and they're quite poor, right? In general, you can find a field here or there that's done okay. But in general, there's a lot of baby fields that have been planted that shouldn't probably been strung, right? And they probably won't be harvested. Mm-hmm. Well, so you get zeros in there, so that begins to pull down the averages as well. I think the overall crop could be good because I think the overall vine size will be smaller. In general, the vine size will be smaller. And what we see in that is overall yield is lower, but overall quality is higher because you get better light penetration into the vine. And on bigger vines, we get a lot of cones that are stuck underneath that don't mature, right? And you see them at harvest, they just don't have any oil, they don't have any aroma, they don't have any weight, They just don't have any. We won't see as much of that this year. What we are seeing, and I talked to 2 growers yesterday, I talked to one on the phone and he mentioned it, and I just happened to run into another one on the road and talk to him. Both of them Yakima chief owners who noticed significant differences in the health of the plants, the growth of the plants, and virus-free versus the virus-infected. And my experience with that has been over the years that temperature changes that go from hot to cold, cold to hot, really help manifest the virus symptoms in the plant. If you have more even temperatures, you don't see it as much. We saw it this year, and we're seeing it in the virus-infected plants. So that's kind of an interesting comment that they both made to me, and it's what we see on our farm as well. Yeah. The virus-free plants seem to just grow through the temperature changes without all of the other, negative impacts to plant growth. So both of those farmers told me that as fast as they can change to virus-free financially, because it's a tremendous commitment, they're going to do. And we've been doing that same thing on our farm. So
that's a good point. At YCR, we're the ones making the virus-free planting material in-house now, propagating them ourselves, getting it out to our grower network. And it's good to hear that the presumption is actually playing out in actual production.
Go see real quick. I'll interject there. I had one of the growers I talked to had just planted beautiful plants. Didn't plant them till 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or whatever. Beautiful plants, virus-free Centennial. And this is a grower that grew the very first Centennial in Washington, so you can probably guess who I'm talking to, right? And when they first started growing Centennial, and I was quite aware of the variety, when we first started growing Centennial, the yields were 10.5, 11 bales, consistently. And then we dug off the fields, and we dug off those fields, and we dug off of those fields, and we spread the virus around, and all of a sudden Centennial's 4
or 5 bales.
Well, it can be, or 7, or whatever. But the opportunity now is that they're going back to virus-free, right? And I would fully expect that those plants would go back to their kind of original yields of 10, 11 bales. You see the same thing in CTZ. Jessica, your dad would remember, Erik, your dad, we used to do CTZ 17, 18 bales. an acre. We had a field set the all-time record at CTC, 20 and a half bales per acre. So other people have seen over 20 as well. It's pretty hard to get a CTC yield much above 14, 15 now, right? It happens occasionally, but we don't see it on average. Anyway, I guess the point is, so there's another bright spot for the industry, right? From a margin per acre basis, switching to virus-free will make the farms more profitable on a per acre basis.
It is good. Yeah, sorry.
Just to add to that, so on the virus-free thing, in Centennial in particular, so it's sensitive to early bloom.
Yeah.
And being more southerly, I tried it back in 2012, 2013. I moved it around. I put it in a different spot, and then I put it over here, and I could never get that thing to do more than like 6 bales, right? And then I was like, what in the heck? This was 3 years ago. I got a few virus-free planted a few acres, whatever, and lo and behold, it's pretty tremendous. I will say that I feel confident that, we may not see 10 or 11 and a half bales in Idaho, but they hit the wire, and even, maybe we were training them too early too. Train June 1st, hit the wire, armed out.
Yeah.
It's really, it's very fascinating. And also on the odd and even years, I always hate even years because of we see that exact same thing on the farm. I love odds and I hate even.
I can't really figure it out because we were trying to tie it into like El Niños and La Niñas, and it doesn't actually work, right? I don't know what it is. But
interesting.
We saw it again this year.
Well, it's cool to see the industry-wide adoption of moving toward clean planting material. We're seeing it play out in yields and overall plant health and vigor. Got to figure out some things on how we produce POs.
We're
it's encouraging growers to refresh yards, and then taking those zeros like you were talking about affects their POs as trailing data. Things for us to worry about.
The other interesting thing, Joe, let me interject because it's this time of year and I think everybody's doing is we go through and we do all of our male scouting, right? Yep. And it's a big deal. So for us, it's 3 times a year, scattered about a week to 10 days apart. And in virus-free, we don't find any males. Mm-hmm. And all the males we find are off of non-virus free stuff that was dug out of other fields.
Interesting.
Yeah, and in Mosaic, we had a Mosaic field just the other day. I looked at the numbers and we walked through there and we found 35 males in the first pass. Didn't find any males in any of the virus free Mosaic. So
Mosaic is a fertile
land. Loves the seed.
yeah, pretty interesting. Is there any other factors that maybe you'd like to mention? Just what's going on? I know right now it's kind of the dog days. We're just kind of, everything's on the string. A lot of hop farmers are taking vacations right now because they don't want to look at the hops right now.
Well, it's funny because Jessica said she loves to look at hops in the middle of July. And I have had a conversation with Steve Peralt, a really close friend of mine for 40 years. And we've always said, if it was at all possible, what we would do is leave the farm right after the 4th of July and come back the middle of August.
Yeah.
Because it's like the worst time of year to look at hops for us.
It is. There's a lot of angst, and there's not. The die is cast at this point, right?
Hurry up and wait.
Yeah. And so I guess being the dog days, what are you doing operations on the farm right now, just as far as kind of maintenance and keeping things rolling?
Just maintaining the mite pressure. Actually just rolled out our first spray here the last couple of days, which is kind of nice to hold off until then.
Pretty overall light mite pressure so far this year?
Us, yeah,
so far so good.
Yeah, a lot of beneficial predators out there as well to kind of help with that. Just kind of maintain the picking machines and facilities, get them ready for harvest time, and that's just kind of the day-to-day right there. Is just some tractor work and weed suppressant by hand with machete crews and things like that. But overall, it's pretty pleasant right now. It's pretty quiet, pretty routine.
I guess for us, what keeps me from staring at the hops and waiting for harvest is we're doing grass seed right now. We've done clover. Wheat got started yesterday, and garlic's about a week away. Nice. So that kind of keeps us busy. We'll have some broccoli coming on right about when harvest starts. So you have to force yourself, because you can go do all these other things, but you have to force yourself to get out there and look at the hops and just keep up with what's going on. So maybe that's why I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the hop side, irrigating, some spraying, pests have been, really minimal so far. I always say so far so good because don't want to jinx it. And we swathed our onion seed and wheat harvest is on. We didn't grow any wheat this year, but the combines and the dust is rolling. So that's you got to kind of watch that if it settles in on like across the street from a hop field or something like that. So you got to kind of be mindful of that, and really just managing and monitoring the irrigation because it has been so incredibly warm. We got guys in the pickers cleaning stuff, pressure washing. I mean, it's kind of, and then we on the seed corn, that's what the crew's doing. We have to pull out the female tassels in the seed crops. So, but, various things, and that's kind of nice to have them do something else. Have something for them to do this time of year because it is kind of dog days of summer for sure.
Mike, there's always something to do on the farm, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the best time of year for us because the mistakes we've made, right? And the things we've done right. And so now it's just kind of like just managing it from here to harvest. And we have other crops that we worry about too. I wish we had the variety of crops that Tom and Diane have available to them, but we have some alfalfa and some tree fruit crops, and we do grow some peppers and whatever. So I mean that keeps us a little bit busy. But I mean hops is the game, right? I mean we do those other things because we either like to or we have to, but we really want the hops is what we really are focused on.
I saw your alfalfa bales around your house the other day.
Yeah, and we have some cattle too. But it doesn't matter. The point is that this is a good time of year overall for everybody. The pressure's reduced. It's not great for our people because we're reducing hours like crazy. Is what it is. We cannot get through harvest without overtime. So our people are going to get a reward when it comes to harvest. That's just the way it is. We're just either not creative enough or haven't figured out how to do it. So they've got a payday coming. That's where we're at.
Well, this has been great. I mean, as we get kind of closer to wrapping up here, is there any last burning issues that you'd like to address personally, or call outs to your fellow farming colleagues, and words of encouragement or words of caution or whatever you might like to share? It's like, get me out of the front of this camera. Get me back in the fields, right? We do have a couple questions that came in from online. One says, in your opinion, what would a healthy hop acreage for the U.S. growing area be? Is it 40,000 acres, 50,000, 60,000? What do you think is a healthy level there?
I think it's aligned with brewer demand and it aligns with what's contracted.
She's a smart lady.
Yeah.
So how do we get brewers making more beer?
How do we get people drinking
How do we
more?
get drinking more beer?
That's the problem.
It's so delicious. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're looking at it strictly economically, 61,000 acres is the best number because that's where our costs are the lowest. Well, that's where our costs are the lowest, and our return on investment is the highest. Is that likely? No, not for some time.
A couple years away.
Yeah, it's a ways away.
I do think that beer has lost market share. Sunny D, there's like a hard Sunny D now.
Kind of sounds good.
It's good.
Welch's has a hard seltzer thing. And that's, how do, as an industry, whether that's on the hop side or the beer side, how do we continue to reinvent ourselves? And, are there some other opportunities? I know people have kind of beat the horse a lot on other uses for hops, but I think it's time to pick up that mantle again a little bit because technology has come so far from the last time that at least I've heard that we really looked hard at that.
Yep.
I think that we need to continue to be nimble as an industry and pursue, I don't know what that means. Maybe it's perfume, maybe it's sleeping pills, I don't know. But there are all these new pharma stuff and different things that, I don't know. I don't know where that opportunity lies. The bee thing was a thing for a second. I don't know where that went or what happened with that. But if we want to try to avoid fatalities, there's going to have to be some reinvention that occurs at some. I mean, I don't have the skill set or science background, or that's not my wheelhouse. But that would be one, opportunity I would see to for those that are in that wheelhouse. That I think, there's opportunity there, some way, shape, or form.
Sure. Okay, anybody else want to comment on that? Got a couple more online questions. We've touched on all this a little bit, each of you have, but they specifically ask what lessons from previous or older generations are you taking into your own growing experience?
If it's not sold, don't grow it.
I would agree with that. I mean, my generation, I guess, that's there now is definitely a little more adverse to growing out in the open. So I think that's helping what we're going through with the market right now.
Big one for me, which was actually said by Jason brought to me the first time, and then he heard it obviously from his father, is the best fertilizer is the farmer's footprints in the field. And growing up with my dad and my grandfather, that was never lost. I mean, they were out every day and checking the fields every day. I mean, me and my dad, and now my brother, we drive around every single field every single day to start our day. And it's just because from day to day these things can change. If you're in this game, like Mike said, you need to pay attention to these ladies every single day. You need to listen to them. You need to go out there, look at them, and they'll speak to you. They'll tell you what they need. So that one's always kind of stuck with me ever since the first time I heard it, and I'll never lose sight of that as long as I'm at the farm.
Okay, got one other question that just came in. Each of you can answer this. What variety are you most excited about this crop?
I'm excited about Centennial because last year was a bit of a struggle, and it looks good, and that's what we'll start with. So
Cool.
I would say the mosaics look like they're coming on. See what they look like when I get home.
Same right now. Mosaic is looking pretty good right now. It's growing through the heat. After that, we have one specific virus-free citrier that is going to be a really fun one to pick. That one's looking really pretty right now.
Nice.
I'm gonna be an outlier here, shocker. We have a 2-year-old variety called Alani that has been very surprising. And new hop varieties are always like, you don't ever know what to expect. So I'm really excited and kind of, high anticipation on what that may or may not do. So.
Great.
Joe, on release varieties, I would say Citra.
Yeah.
I'm most excited about, but partially because we've converted almost all of our Citra. 85% of our Citra acres have been converted to virus-free, and they look fabulous across all the farms, and they've proven that. But on the experimental side of it, we're growing, as you know, we grow several experimental varieties, HBC varieties, and 2 in particular, I am absolutely flabbergasted by how good they're growing and how beautiful they look. One of them is 1134.
Looks amazing.
It is an amazing plant, and hopefully it's got a great market for it. But the other one is 1519, and that variety is really, really vigorous and really beautiful and very consistent from plant to plant. So those 2 I'm really excited about, and I'm hoping that Yakima Chief and brewers find value in those because they would be great varieties to grow.
Yeah. 1019 as well is looking great. I mean, really consistent across your farm, Pearl Farms.
Yeah.
Everywhere where we're growing that is really looking
Yeah,
good.
and actually I think I misspoke when I said 1519. I meant 1019.
1019.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's all good. It looks great.
Yep.
Also, I mean, we've got 586 with an imminent release coming up here in August. I feel like, despite some agronomic challenges in that one, I think we're going to be really happy with the quality of that crop this year as well. So just one of my personal favorites. Looking forward to releasing that and seeing how that is adopted by the brewing industry. One more question just came in. So it says, like much of society, have you changed your drinking habits, knowing it may not help your livelihood as a hop farmer? I have not.
Can I no comment that?
Seems like a personal question.
I will say that there's some pretty good NA beers out there, though.
Absolutely.
Athletics doing a great job. Some of our local Seattle breweries are as well. So I'm more open to that. Every other beer, it's kind of nice.
Sure. No, and back when we were kids, it was the early NA beers were not
terrible.
good. I won't name any specifically, but doing the whole sorghum thing just wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
So now they're able to use
Yeah.
malted barley still and extract that, and it's pretty cool. We've also got, oh, I guess it just disappeared. Anybody else want to comment on that? Everyone's still drinking beer, right?
Yeah, not as much, right? As you get older, you just don't drink as much. I mean, it's typically what I find. But to your point, Jessica, there's some great non-alcoholic options, and our friends at Sierra Nevada have released two of them that are fabulous.
Yeah.
Athletics are good as well, but
Athletic is a top 10 brewery.
yeah,
As a non-alcoholic brewery. That's
yeah, no, it's
incredible.
crazy, right? Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Okay, so that wraps up the Q&A from our online submissions. And I think that brings this whole thing to a conclusion here. So again, on behalf of Yakima Chief Ranches, Yakima Chief Hops, thank you all for making the time.
Yeah, thank you.
It's enjoyable. I certainly learned a lot of stuff. Hopefully the folks watching out there were able to glean some things as well. We appreciate your attendance. And I guess between now and then, have a happy and safe harvest. And we'll get together and do this again.
Sounds great.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks.